Deborah Heiser is an applied development psychologist, a TEDx speaker, consultant, author, and founder of the Mentor Project. She is here today on Up to discuss mentoring and how those of us over age 40 are really hitting the sweet spot of life. Let go. Well, Deborah Heiser, welcome to Uncommon Philanthropist.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Your passion is mentoring and engaging people as they kind of, evolve into the later years. And I just am so excited to have this conversation because I think people over 40, over 50 have so much to give. So let's get them mobilized and let's get them going. And I know you're just going to be able to inspire us and give us such a roadmap on how we get there.
Oh, I'd love to talk about it. 40 is when we first get that itch developmentally to want to give back because we want to matter. We've been checking off boxes that other people are putting in front of us, go to college or get a job or have a partner, get a house or a place to live. All of these things are boxes that are sort of put on us. By the time we reach midlife, we're like, I can make my own boxes.
Yeah.
And that's when we get an itch to want to give back, to make sure that all those boxes we've been checking mattered and that we matter in the world.
Well, tell us a little bit about you as a girl. Did you always want to pursue psychology, or how did you find your way into this field?
No, I didn't. I'm a first-gen college student, so I didn't even know what a psychologist was. But some interesting things got me interested in it. The first one was my grandfather. As a 5-year-old, my grandfather would take me out with him on his errands. And I would get in his big car with him and we'd drive around town. And this was in Des Moines, Iowa. And I'd be in his gigantic Cadillac riding with him. And he'd point out all the people that we would pass. And he would say, do you see Mary over there? She's had a hard life, but she put her kids through college. See that guy Jim over there? His wife just chewed him out for not bringing in the dry cleaning. He would tell me all these elaborate stories about people. And then he would always say, we don't know anybody's story. Everybody has one, and they're much more complicated and complex than we would ever guess by looking at them. And I was 5, so I thought he knew all of these people. And he didn't. He was just giving me that as a sort of a lesson. And I took that in, and I'm always curious about people's stories. And that was one of the things that led me into psychology. And then as a 20-year-old, my grandmother became depressed. I didn't even know what depression was. And I went down to visit her. She was always the fun grandma who I would visit. And I was kind of wondering what I was going to do with my life. And I got down there and somebody who was a psychologist said, we're going to fix your grandma. She just needs a med change. She's on a medication for an illness that she has, and it caused her to be depressed.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, all right. I came back a couple months later and she was all better. And I said, that's it. I'm going to be a grandma fixer. And then from that point forward, I said, I'm going to study aging and become a psychologist. I can really say that my grandparents got me there.
Is so amazing. And I'm a first-time grandparent, and my parents were a good bit older than me, so I really had more like a grandparent experience with my parents. My dad was the one driving the giant Lincoln, whatever. But, we never were charitable in the household, or they were children of the Depression. And when you grow up to survive, it changes you in a different kind of way. But it forges you in a way that's beautiful because they didn't have much and they didn't need much. They were kind of grateful for everything. And I think we've gotten away from that. You said something when you were sharing your early story about being curious. And I think that's, as we get older, a lot of us lose that curiosity. We think we know it all. So as a psychologist, please unpack that a little bit about the importance of holding on to curiosity.
So we get so enmeshed in following those boxes that we have in front of us to check that we put blinders on to everything else. Our goals and our purpose aren't necessarily our own at some point. So when we're little, we're allowed to be curious. And that's, oftentimes encouraged. But once people get to school and at a certain age, it's what are you going to do with the rest of your life? At a very young age, we're told, pick what you're going to do and be, whether you're going to go to college, whether you're not, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do? And that puts blinders on us. So there's not as much room for curiosity or to think, uh-oh, if I fail, what is going to happen? And curiosity is really saying, I'm going to go out there and look at things in a new way or question things. But that can be a time eat for us emotionally if we say, I'm curious about this, but it's taking us away from what our focus is on getting forward. So we finally get to feel curious again once we hit midlife. The things that enclose us, are we're experts in things that we already know, that we've known. Our families are in a way that we're comfortable with, whatever form they're in, and we know who we are. So it gives us an opportunity to become curious finally again. I'd love it if we could be curious earlier, but midlife is that point that we can really do that.
And having conversations with people, to be curious and ask about them, about their life. Be specific with questions instead of just talking about yourself. I find that we're kind of losing our art as conversationalists with being truly curious about the person that's on the opposite side of us. I mean, I encourage people to, ask more questions and talk less because it's always, I mean, you never know what you're going to find out.
Yeah, you're right. I think most of us have an idea of what somebody is like, so we don't ask the questions. We have assumptions that are already made based on all the cues that are around us. So we feel like we don't need to ask those questions. And I think that for the most part, if we do learn about people, it really does make us engage in more meaningful connections. I can tell you that if I were to just look at my neighbor who walks his dog, I might have assumptions based on the kind of dog he has or what sweatpants he's wearing when he walks his dog.
Sneaker.
And that's something that we should get away from. We should be talking to our neighbor who's walking their dog, but it feels awkward for us if we haven't been really shown how we can do that. So I have sympathy and empathy for people who are in a position where they're like, "Hey, I've gotten to a place I don't know how to express my curiosity." It can feel awkward.
Yeah, sure. My father-in-law just recently passed away. He was 96 and he was a man of few words, humble, good, kind. And one day I just out of the blue, I asked him, I said, Bob, did you ever, when you were in high school, did you ever do theater? Thinking that would be the last thing he would do. And you know what he said? Yes. He was
Really?
in a play. And we
My
were just like,
gosh.
it was such a delight to uncover that little treasure. And it would have been gone, if I wouldn't have asked that simple question. So ask the questions, especially with your older relatives, because once they're
Oh,
gone,
for sure.
all that good info is gone as well.
And doesn't that make you think about him differently?
But totally.
It makes that picture a lot brighter.
Oh, I know. So fun. Okay. Well, in preparing for this conversation with you, I learned a new word about, and I'm probably not going to say it correctly, generativity
Yes. Yes,
versus
you said it right.
stagnation. Generativity. I've been practicing. So, Deborah, talk us through what exactly is that? Because I found it to be so, so interesting.
So, generativity is a developmental milestone. So, most of us think of our development as physical. We walk, we run, we do things very rapidly when we're young. We have a very steep incline and then a slow, steady decline. We usually think of that in an inverted V as our development. But we have an emotional development that we also go through that never ends all the way to the end of our lives. It starts at birth all the way to the end of our lives. And I like to tell people that, our emotional journey starts, when we're little, we throw tantrums, we do things, we don't have a lot of coping skills, and we're learning to navigate our emotions. By the time we hit midlife, there's a developmental stage called generativity. And what that means is that we're built to want to give back to others without expecting anything in return. And so it's really where you're giving a piece of you that you find to be important to someone else and they're holding on to it. It's a form of immortality in a way. So people will think it's legacy, but it's also for us in the moment allowing us to feel like we matter. It gives us a sense of usefulness, relevance, purpose. That's what generativity does for us. Just when we've hit a stage where, we might be saying, I've checked all the boxes, now what? This is where the new box comes in. We say, I'm looking for purpose. And so many people have talked about purpose for a long time. But if you think of purpose in the terms of generativity and how we're built to, emotionally develop through our lifespan, in this stage, purpose is really what is my purpose in the world and how do I matter? Not, I better go find a purpose. We all have a purpose. So, generativity, people often think, well, that has to be something big. Generativity is mentoring, volunteering, and philanthropy. And if you're looking at some of these things, people will think that generativity is, these are three concrete things you can do. There's overlap with them. We're doing them all the time and we don't realize it. Form of mentorship is passing down religion. If a person is religious, they didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I opened a box and here's religion."
Mhm.
It's been mentored and passed down for, centuries. The same with family values, traditions. Those are all mentored. We often think of mentorship as work, but all of this is generativity. So if you look in your own family, you can see people who are saying, I want to make sure that my grandchildren know this. Just like I mentioned with my grandfather, who was like, I want my granddaughter to see people in a certain way. My grandmother, that experience, became a part of me wanting to fix grandmas. So the mentorship is that key component. With philanthropy, that's a huge one. It isn't just passing down money to your next generations. It's the little things that we do that people don't often count, that are wrapped up in our values, our value system, and how we can give to others and feel relevant, feel purposeful, useful. It's those tiny little things that we give that make us say, I feel good today. I
Yeah.
did a little something nice. And that's philanthropy.
There you go. It's day to day and how you treat people. It is when somebody in your family cooks a beautiful meal and you sit around the table. And I mean, that's just precious time. And that is definitely a form of philanthropy, especially in my house. Food is love. I mean, we love
Ours too.
love to share a meal. And there is something magic that happens when you break bread together with people, whether it's those that you share life with as family or those that, you may just be curious. That's why I love, meeting new people and saying, let's have coffee instead of let's Zoom. I mean, we're in different places, so we can't be having coffee together, but this is
But
the
we
next
are.
best thing. Oh, cheers. That's a cheers. Here we go.
But yes, this is a way, if we stop thinking of things as concrete, like for example, mentorship. If I thought that mentorship was, I'm getting somebody to give me something. That's what a lot of people think it is. And it's really not that. Or I'm going to give some money, and people don't understand what that big give is and why you're doing it. Is it tax write-off? What is the real philanthropy there? And it's really the emotional concept. So generativity is an emotional developmental milestone. And all three of those components, philanthropy, volunteering, and mentoring, are emotional things. They are not concrete things. It's not a checkbook. It's, how do I feel when I'm doing this? What is driving me to do this? What do I want to feel when I do this? So it's just a transaction. And none of those things within generativity are transactions.
So good. Well, before we move on to really get deep into mentoring, because I love, kind of that space you've carved off, you encourage people to embrace aging and to look forward to it and not to, be so focused on what's happening physically, but the possibility. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Deborah.
Well, absolutely. So, I teach students who are in their 20s, like up to 21, 18 to 21. And I always tell them, look, you guys can outrun me, but I'm happier than you. And one thing we know is developmentally, if we look at our emotional development, we do get happier as we get older. And part of that is that, by the time you hit midlife, you don't really care as much about what other people think. You're really caring about, what do I need and want, and how can I give? How can I be a part of the world? And that makes us feel fulfilled. And when you're young, your job isn't to be fulfilled. Your job is to figure out who you are and where you're going. And that can give us a sense of angst. So, or anxiety, that's how it is. Even the milestones that we're looking forward to, getting married, there's anxiety with that. There's anxiety with career. There's anxiety with all of those good things that we're looking for.
True.
We've done those by the time we hit midlife. And that is something that most people don't realize is that you finally get to say to yourself, now that I know who I am, I can do something that I never could do before. Maybe I've been doing a job because it's a job and I need to support my family. Well, now I have a little more bandwidth. I can go pursue some of the things I enjoy. If you're hitting retirement, now the door is wide open. What we see are not hurdles anymore, but opportunities. And that's what most people think we have are challenges. So they'll say, oh, she needs reading glasses. I have to wear reading glasses now. I don't care. I put them on and I can see. And I talk to people who don't have a lot of physical mobility and I'll say, why and how are you happy? And they'll say, because I get to do everything I enjoy. They're not worried about doing all of the physical activities that they could do so well when they were younger, but they'll say, I see my grandchildren. I get to see how great my family is turning out. And I talk to them all the time. I go to lunch with my friends. Certain things I can get on the computer. I can still read. They go on and on and on with lists of things that they enjoy. And I do not hear from them, here are all the things that are bothering me. So if you look at your lifespan, the things that you have to look forward to are better emotional health.
And don't fall into that trap of always talking about your ailments because that only makes you feel bad. I'm like, stop. Stop
It's
talking
funny
about our
because
ailments.
I see that too. People be like, oh, I can't do things that I once could, or I groan when I get up because my knee hurts or my back hurts. But if you still talk to that person, they'll do that. And then they'll still talk about being happier.
For sure. Okay, before we hit mentoring, in your TED Talk, which is fabulous, and I will link it in show notes, you mentioned the Ebenezer effect.
Yeah.
What exactly
Yes.
is that?
So the Ebenezer effect is someone who hasn't reached generativity. And we all know an Ebenezer out there. So Ebenezer Scrooge from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol is the character that so many of us know. He's the self-made guy who lives in a mansion. He has servants taking care of all of his needs, and he's miserable. And everybody knows somebody like this. That's, the downer in the group, or somebody that's never quite happy, even though on paper they look like everything should be great. So the Ebenezer effect is somebody who hasn't reached generativity. But if you've watched any of the Scrooge movies, you see that it's like in an instant that he goes from misery to joy. And that's when he starts giving. That's when he gives back. He is engaged in philanthropy. He's giving out money to the extra money to the maid, to the boy down the street who gets him the turkey. He's giving back to Bob Cratchit and to Tiny Tim. He becomes like a mentor to Tiny Tim. And this is how it works in real life. It is like a light switch being turned on. And people think, well, it must be a process. No, it's not. It's actually just like it was in the movie, except that there aren't people, ghosts in the background. It's that quick. And when a person makes that switch, that's the Ebenezer effect. They've moved from Ebenezer into a world of joy.
So, what are some of those triggers that help turn on generativity?
I'll give you an example of somebody, and I wrote about him in the Mentorship Edge. So this was an individual who was completely like Ebenezer. He was wealthy. He had a really nice apartment. He had all kinds of people who would come in and take care of all of his needs. He had his groceries delivered, his meals made for him, all of this stuff. And he would sit in his beautiful apartment doing nothing. And one day, the three little boys who lived across the hall from him knocked on his door, and they just had a question for him. And he invited them in. And he said, would you like ice cream? And they, of course, said yes. So he took out golden rimmed bowls and served them at his glass table that was always pristine and was filled with smudges and ice cream and all of this stuff. And then they came back every Wednesday for ice cream day. And it was that quick It was that the boys knocked on the door. I don't know what it was for at the time. Something, very basic. It could have even been a Halloween knock at the door, but he invited them in, talked to the mom, had them in for ice cream. And that was a switch that was flipped. And in that case, we see this happening all the time with people, but we don't really put it together. So at the end of his life, he was very old when this happened. The kids went to his funeral. And they were little kids. It was unexpected that they would want to do that, but they did, and they spoke about him. And those gold-rimmed bowls were given to the boys. And that is something that most of us wouldn't ever hear this kind of a story or think of the significance of it. But his memory lives on in those kids. And those acts, it didn't matter that he was older. He got such joy and pleasure in the end from engaging with them emotionally.
And it's never too late to get started.
No, you're never too old. That's the good thing about development. If you look at emotional development, you have just like a little baby that can walk at 6 months or 16 months. It's all the same in the end. It's not like one's going to be an elite athlete. It can be anything. A baby can weigh 7 pounds or 12 pounds at birth, and you would think the 12-pounder is going to be an NFL player. It doesn't work like that. In emotional development, we have a wide space to be able to accomplish these developmental milestones. So you could be 96 or 36, you could be early or late with it, and it's still okay. You'll still keep on moving.
Well, I'd love to get your thoughts on mentoring. And I think mentoring and volunteering, it's those things that a lot of us that haven't engaged in it, we're like, oh, I need to do that. I need to mentor. I need to volunteer. And we never quite do it. So tell us how you found your way to mentoring and just why we should all consider being a mentor.
I'll first say we all are, and we just don't know it. And that was new to me to learn that. So I was studying everything and researching everything no one wants to have or get. So I was a researcher. I was running a research division at a large organization and studying all the things that no one wanted to talk with me about at a cocktail party, like depression and, end of life issues, all these things that, people were like, ooh, go away. And I said, I went to a party and was so excited to tell everybody about my accomplishments. I had written a book and I had all these publications and all of these grants and things. So I couldn't wait to tell people about it. And a guy across from me heard me talking about my accomplishments, and it was like crickets in the room. Nobody was happy about hearing about it. And the guy across from me said, "What do we have to look forward to?" And I was stumped. I didn't have anything to tell him. I just said, well, less depression. And he was like, that's not what I want to look forward to. And so I decided to go out and look at what do we have to look forward to. And I had no idea there's all this stuff. This was in the, late 90s and early 2000. There was stuff being done, but nobody was talking about it. It was when everybody was afraid of Alzheimer's disease and these sorts of things and end of life. And that was fear making everyone afraid. So when I went out, I said, wow, we get happier as we get older. There was, Laura Carstensen doing this research. There was a Harvard longitudinal study that was being done that was talking about how we get happier as we get older. All of these studies that just weren't being talked about. So I said, I need to find out about this. So I said, okay, what is something that makes us happier? Giving back. Okay. I started to look at generativity. I met with Dan McAdams, who's like the demigod of generativity and writes about it out of Northwestern. And then I interviewed 45 mentors, people who said they mentor, from a 4-star general to grandmas. And they all said the same thing. First of all, they all cried. I've never seen so many grown men cry when they talked about mentoring. And I was so intrigued by this. But they all said, well, I have a hard time finding mentees. And I thought, really? So there was this guy, Bill Cheswick. He's the father of the firewall. He and Steve Bellevin invented the firewall. And they said, yeah, I'm getting ready to retire from Bell Labs. And no one's ever going to know all of the work that I've done. I'm going to be irrelevant. I'm going to be useless. And I felt terrible. I didn't know how I would get him into mentoring, but he was like, I need to get into schools. And we were talking and he was like, it's not like I can go to a park and say, hey, kid, do you want a mentor? And I realized there's a problem here. If people who are so famous and well known can't find a mentee, we have problems.
Yes.
So about a couple years went by and I said, "Hey, Bill, I think I have an opportunity to get you into schools. Do you want to do it?" And he said, "I'm in." And then at that time, a few other people also said, "Oh, count me in too." So we had about 10 people working to get into schools and to do mentoring. And then we said, let's make this a company. And we founded it as the Mentor Project, about 7 of us. And then I was told no one will ever want to do this. You have just 7 random people who are into this, and that's all there's going to be. And then within 6 months, we had 60, then 90, and then by the end of the year, 100. And these were elite people in the sense that it was everybody people said would never have the time or desire. An astronaut, a 7-time Nobel Prize nominee. The people were coming and saying, I don't have students around me to give back to. I feel irrelevant. So as soon as we started doing that, we were just last year, I just transferred the company to somebody else, but just last year we gave away $3.5 million of mentorship hours in 5 countries just in that year. So in total, we've impacted about more than 100,000 students in 7 countries.
Uh,
We had no goal, and we really found that mentorship is something that people want. They just don't know how to get involved in it or give back or where they should go. And so that's how it all got started, was just talking to people and realizing there's this big need out there, not just for mentees to find a mentor, but mentors are looking for the same thing.
how would you address the everyday people about going about mentoring, developing, finding a mentor-mentee relationship? Where do you even begin for something like that?
So, what most of us don't realize is that we've been mentored and we have been mentoring. So, every grandparent who is passing down the family traditions, that's mentoring. So, they're probably doing it and they don't know it. So, they don't give themselves the credit for it. But if you enter the next holiday and you go into a house and you are doing something that feels comfortable to you, the smells, everything, somebody started that and that's been passed down. So take a look at those relatives. Every Thanksgiving, I get my grandmother's recipe cards out that are handwritten in her handwriting, and I make that meal. That's mentoring. I didn't realize the impact of that until my uncle, who had been eating his wife's Thanksgiving, came to visit me for Thanksgiving, and he almost cried because he said, I feel like I'm at home. And home to him meant a child. And so we don't realize how much mentoring is happening with values, culture, traditions, religion. All of those things are mentored. So if you think you need a degree, you don't need a degree for any of that. Just pass down a recipe. It's as simple and as small as that. So I always tell people the idea of mentorship got hijacked by corporate America so that we feel like I have to give back an expertise that I have. But no one will remember Bob the accountant in 300 years. But they will remember the culture and values that you pass down, the traditions that you pass down, the religion that you pass down. All of that is mentorship. So if you feel you don't have a degree, you're still good. You are actually going to probably be remembered more for the things that you give to others that matter to you than if it's title related.
That's so good. And also, I think we have a good idea of what our strengths are.
Yes.
And just being aware of when you can step in and offer to help. Or I know people have a lot of ideas that they think they are good, but sometimes you just need somebody to sit down and talk with and kind of voice them. I love to step in that role and I say, let's have coffee and just talk about it. I'm not bringing solutions to the table. A lot of times people need to get it out of their head and talk it out. And I've never thought of that as being a form of mentoring, but
It
I
is.
do believe it is.
You are correct. So you're talking about lateral mentorship.
Mm.
And that's a term that I coined a while back because I realized that so many people, so I started really studying it in 2015. And I realized, wow, our founding fathers of the United States were mentors. They all had a separate expertise that they came with, and then they founded the country. All entrepreneurs are lateral mentors. Our tech boom happened based on lateral mentors. So if you look at, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, lateral mentors. So part of mentoring is helping a person process something. We think we have to give them specific knowledge, like, here's how you do this math. No, what really it is sometimes you need what I say is a board of directors of mentors in your life. So that when you have something that you need to run by somebody, you go to one of your board of directors. Think of yourself as a corporation. You're going to want to have somebody that you can run by this idea. That is mentorship because you're going to them because they're an expert in that and they're going to help you in that. Are they your boss? Are they above you? No, they just happen to have different expertise. So, there's a woman that I know who sells Mary Kay. She has the best strategy set up for how she does things. I've never seen anybody like that. I go
Love
to
it.
her all the time and I'm like, how do you put together all of that stuff the way you do? Just give me a nugget of that. And that's where we can find people in our surroundings who we can say, can I pick your brain for that? Can I pick your brain for that? And if we are engaged in that, we're doing mentoring all the time.
So be on the listen for those opportunities where sometimes you just say, how can I help with that?
Yes. Yes.
And then push back, and people are quick to say, "No, no, 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 I wouldn't wanna impose on you." It's like, "No, sincerely, who can I connect you with?" It's like we all have something we can bring, and
Mhm.
you just don't know when they're missing that connection, and you might be able to provide it. I love to and this is probably lateral mentorship too, is connecting people. It's
It
like, you
is.
need to know somebody, you 2 need to meet, and
Exactly. That
I
is.
love doing that kinda
What
stuff.
you're doing right now is a form of what I call modern mentoring. You are on a podcast. There are people who are gonna be meaningfully connected to what you're talking about and taking in what you're giving. That's mentorship. So if we look at the definition of mentorship, there are 5 things in it. It's like baking brownies. If you leave one of them out, it's like leaving sugar out of brownies. It'll look like it, but it won't taste like it. So it starts with generativity, where you need to have somebody who wants to give something back, right? So that they say, I have the ability to give something back. Or in the case of you with the podcast, you might say, I'm going to bring in all sorts of experts to give back. And that's a form of generativity. You aren't expecting anything in return from others. You're not saying, okay, give me, something from whoever's listening. That's generativity. Now, the mentees are the people who are saying, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this. Rena Olson has been giving me this information that I've been wanting. So the next thing is intrinsic motivation. We have to want to do it for no pay, without reward, without award, whatever. We could be silent in wanting to do this. That's why we don't often think of when people are passing things down over the generations. We don't think about it. It's just silently done. Nobody's like, thanks for mentoring me, grandma. Like that's
Yeah.
not how we usually work or operate. So intrinsic motivation is an example of doing the same thing. One intrinsic versus not is if I were to go volunteer my time at a soup kitchen giving out food and beverage to hungry, thirsty people, I'd be volunteering my time to do that. If I were to do the same thing at Starbucks, I would be expecting pay. Giving out food and beverage to hungry, thirsty people at Starbucks doesn't feel right to do that for no pay. That's intrinsic motivation. We also need to have a meaningful connection. So, what that means is that if you are engaging with people and mentoring with them, you need to be connected with them and care about them, not just throwing out information like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? The two people should like each other and care about each other. And that I say that because there's so many times that people say, I had a toxic mentor. They're toxic. They're not your mentor. Think of a
Yeah.
friend. You can have a million people that pass in front of you. Why do you only choose the ones that you're friends with? That's what we do with mentorship as well. We choose the people who mean something to us. We also need to trust the person. Imagine if you felt like, I'm going to tell Rena all this stuff. Now Rena's going to go and start her own company based on this. I need to
Oh, yeah.
trust somebody, and you need to trust that I'm going to go out and speak well of you, that I'm not going to throw you under the bus somehow. That's trust. We see that in the workplace. We see that in families. We see that with, our lateral mentors. That's why lateral mentoring often works because we trust the people around us. We've already sort of vetted them in some way, and we also need a goal. So there should always be a goal. We often leave this part out. And that can be that if you're talking to somebody that you see that there's a problem that needs to be solved for that person, that you could say, "Hey, I think I have a solution for this. Do you want to hear it?" And then you can work through the mentoring with that. But you need all five of those. Otherwise, you're just chatting with a friend, or you're engaged in something that is maybe coaching or advising or something else that's not mentoring if you're getting paid.
That's so good. Okay, so give me a soundbite. Tell me, tick through those 5 elements of mentoring.
The five components of mentoring are generativity, intrinsic motivation, meaningful connection, trust, and goals.
That's a really, really good framework on, as you begin your exploration of mentoring more. I love that so much. So, I love how you talk about bringing the generations together to solve problems. So, how exactly do we do that, and what exactly does that look like?
Oh, it can look like so many different things. We always think that it's an older person who has to come and give their wisdom to a younger person. But in so many cases, it's the opposite. So if you're in a company and you are looking to sell a widget, whatever that is, you want to sell coffee mugs, right? And you are coming at it from, I'm Gen X. And if I come at it from just the Gen X perspective, I'm going to miss out on all the marketing that would go into, say, Gen Z. What kind of mug is Gen Z looking for? Oh, they don't want a mug at all. They want, a big giant, they want it in an iced coffee thing. Oh, I'm going to miss that mark. I'm going to have poor sales. And a lot of companies do that. They forget that they are in need of reverse mentoring, which is younger people giving things. They think it's just tech, and it's not. We need to pass on the culture and the values of other generations and understand it. So if you're sitting around a boardroom or a conference room, and you're discussing something, you should really be thinking of who is at this table, what generations are here. I might have missed the mark if I don't include other generations, or that perspective. I can tell you that for me, I'm getting ready to start a new company. So I said I might want to learn social media so that I can learn about the other generations and so I don't miss the mark on what I'm doing.
Sure.
So I contacted somebody that I knew already who is a social media influencer. And I said, "Can you set me up on TikTok?" And he was like, "Sure, I'll do that." And he's been teaching me how to do that. That's reverse mentoring. That we have bridged that generation gap. He was like, "I'm understanding you more than I thought I would. And I'm understanding him and I'm understanding a younger culture now than ever would have." And that's really important, is that we don't say to ourselves within any workplace or in any environment, "I'm too old for that. I'm better than that. I'm
Yeah,
above that, or I'm beneath that." We
yeah.
should be saying, I want to be a part of that."
Oh, that TikTok, I don't know. Then you have to be pretty brave to put yourself out
It
there,
was
so good
horrible.
job, Deborah.
I will tell you, there are some things. I have skydived. I've done all kinds of things that require a little bit of courage, just a teeny bit. This was the biggest cringe leap I think I ever thought. I don't do the dances or anything like that. But I will tell you, I said to myself, I better walk the talk. I got to walk the talk. I got to do what I say. And it actually has been a pretty interesting journey. I'm on month 2, so I'm still
Awesome.
new
Well,
at it.
you're inspiring me to get on there, and I'll give you a follow and see what you're doing, because that is yeah, and I think older people, we get old and set in our ways, and we're just not willing to try new things, and if you don't try new things, you can stagnate, and you might miss something that you really, really love, but you don't know if you don't give it a shot, so, what's the harm in doing that?
I figured those who are on will see me and those who aren't won't, right? And I'm not doing anything I'm ashamed or embarrassed of. So I figured I'm going to do this. I'm going to give it a try. And I think that in midlife and when we're thinking of philanthropy, we're thinking of volunteering and we're thinking of mentoring, even things that feel like we're giving a piece of ourselves to others that feel good, it feels hard to take that first step. It really does. I'll volunteer tomorrow. I will engage in some philanthropic outreach another day. I'll mentor tomorrow. And I try to encourage people to say, do it now. right now while you're thinking of it. Like, don't get up out of your chair, get on your computer, reach out to somebody, text somebody, do what you need to do, because then there's no turning back. You're locked in.
And if you know somebody who's engaged, ask to go along with them to volunteer. Most people really love to enjoy that type of experience.
And talk to people about what they do. No one talks about philanthropy with each other. They think that's a taboo topic because they think that it's money. But if you talk to somebody and you say, "What are you doing? How are you giving back?" People will oftentimes be able to rattle off all kinds of things, or they'll say, "I don't know." I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who I know really well, and I'll say, "Have you ever mentored?" And they'll say, "No." And I'll say, "Wait a second, I know you, and here's an instance when you did." And they'll say, "Oh, I didn't think of that." So it's a discussion that you could have with somebody that only results in a person feeling good about themselves.
Such a simple question. How are you giving back?
Yeah.
Or where do you give back? Are you engaged with, any local nonprofits that I need to know about? So people that are engaged love to talk about that stuff.
The interesting thing is I just found out about a lot of the local organizations like Rotary, there's Lions Club, there are all these things that people while they're working don't necessarily know to join. They're really hyper local and they can be as big as you want. And those are great places to engage in philanthropy and volunteering and mentoring. You can do all three in those. And they've been around forever. And they feel to a lot of people very antiquated, like they don't know
Mhm.
what they are. But those are really great places to start. So if you're saying, I don't know where to go, look really locally. It could be an animal shelter, it could be Rotary, it could be, the Lions Club, it could be your
Good thing.
religious institution, it could be anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I'm a member of my local Alpharetta Rotary Club, and it is on fire. So we meet Friday mornings at 7:15 a.m. at the American Legion just right down the street. And you walk in, people come in and they're kind of sleepy first-time visitors and they're like, "Whoa, what is happening here?" And people are just, grabbing a cup of coffee and ready to take on any number of projects. And I think last year we pumped $500,000 back into the local nonprofits in our community, so we do fundraising events and all
Hmm.
kinds of stuff. It is just, and I've just connected with people that I never would have. So it's community as well, which I think a lot of people, it's hard to find. It's hard to find your people. It really is.
It is. But once you join, like I joined the Rotary in my neighborhood. And
Awesome.
I didn't know my next door neighbor until I joined Rotary. I saw him all the time, but I really didn't know him, and now I got to know him. But the reason I joined was because I found out that, when COVID hit, they brought in a truckload of diapers for all the new moms so they didn't have to go to a store to shop, and then they give out $36,000 worth of turkeys at Thanksgiving just in my neighborhood, in that local area, and I thought, I gotta be involved in this. So and I didn't know what they were. I had no idea what this organization was. So absolutely, these are great places to meet all your neighbors, to get connected, to engage in philanthropy in ways that you are not writing a check and putting your name on a building, but you're getting involved in your community and making it a better place.
Love that we share that. So it's not every day I get to talk to a psychologist. So I've written a book on joy about my mom's life. And in doing so, I'm really trying to educate people on what's the difference between happiness versus joy. And I would love your thoughts on that topic.
I'm glad you brought that up because I always misuse it. I use the term happiness oftentimes when it's fulfillment. So, I'll say we get happier as we get older. Really, we're getting more fulfilled. But people understand that term happiness, that umbrella term. So joy is a feeling that's deeper. Happiness is fleeting. Like you get happy and it goes away. So if you're doing something like giving back or something like that, or you're remembering somebody that you love, you'll feel joy. It's a deeper feeling that doesn't leave as opposed to happiness, which is fleeting.
It's good to have happy. I mean, we want to be happy, but I think so many people are just chasing the stuff, and the stuff is never going to bring you long term fulfillment. It's the relationships, it's the relationship with a creator. It's really the big, deep things that
It is.
mentoring. I mean, I think mentoring is a form of, that could bring you joy when you're
Yes.
really pouring into somebody.
Yes, you're right.
versus taking, So many of us.
Absolutely. So if you think about somebody that you love, you'll feel that pang of joy, that's different than if you go buy a handbag.
So good. Well, we only have a few minutes left, but I'd love to learn more about the book you've written called The Mentorship Edge. Tell us about that.
Yes, thank you. So I wrote the book, The Mentorship Edge, because I wanted people to understand what mentorship is, that it's actually part of a developmental milestone, that it's part of generativity, what its real true definition is, what makes up mentorship and what it isn't, and how I give examples in the book about all kinds of people in many different situations and settings where mentorship is involved and people didn't even know it. Like Charlie Camarda, the astronaut, was saved in space by a lateral mentor. And likewise, a grandma who raised her grandson. We have there are all these different examples. So the mentorship edge is there for somebody who wants to learn more about mentorship, get involved in mentoring, and somebody who maybe wants to give back or find a mentor, get it all. So it's also what it isn't. If you're getting paid, you're not a mentor. That's just a hint. But you can find the book in any format. If you like audiobooks, it's available in audio format, Kindle, anywhere you buy books.
Always check out your local bookstore first, but then there's
Yeah.
Amazon, which is the
I
the
wish we
easy
had
button.
more local bookstores. I don't have any in my neighborhood anymore.
We have one that's walkable from where we are. They opened up 3 years ago, and they are all about building community. She has so many neat types of book clubs and has a big gathering space,
I
and,
love it.
books make such great gifts,
They do.
and a lot of the bookstores have unique accessories and
I love bookstores. It's the smell of them. I love them. I love those in
I
libraries.
know, I know, so fun. So, Deborah, the tagline of Uncommon Philanthropist is "Let Go." So I love to close out these conversations by turning it over to my guest. And if you can just give me a big old let go and then talk about how mentoring and letting go hand in hand.
Let go of your inhibitions. Make an ask. Ask someone if you can help them or ask someone if they can help you. It's small. Do the smallest little ask, but let go of your inhibitions. I can tell you firsthand that by letting go, I have accomplished way more than I ever thought I could. But you have to let go and make the ask. Ask someone for help or ask someone if you can help them. That's how mentoring works.
And as we get older, we tend to hang on. We don't want to let go. So I
You're
think
so right about that.
for my older and younger people, let go and let's just get out there and make the world a better place. And I
Yeah.
believe through mentoring, we definitely can do that. It happens one person at a time by sharing your knowledge and your passions with other people. And I love how you've reframed it. So we think about mentoring within our homes first, how we need to be very intentional about what we pass down to our kids and our grandkids and need to make sure that we're passing down the good stuff, not the other stuff.
Yeah, once you're intentional, you start to really do that, and you start to the other really amazing thing about it is that you start to value the things that are passed down, and those tend to be the emotional things that are passed down, like the meals and like you said, you like to sit around the table. That's a value that you're passing down that, it will always hold that feeling when people gather around a table, whether you're all together or starting at somewhere new. So I love it.
Deborah, how can people get in touch with you to learn?
You can find me on Psychology Today. I'm a contributor there on the right side of 40. I have my own blog, which is also the right side of 40. And you can find me at deborahheiser.com. And you can find me anywhere on social media that you're looking, for just look up my name, Deborah Heiser.
Well, I have enjoyed chatting with you, having a cup of coffee together. And thank you so much for sharing just such tremendous knowledge and insight into mentoring and embracing aging with vigor and knowledge and not sadness because, some of the physical stuff starts to fade. We need to enjoy every bit, every
Sure.
every second we're here on earth. Let go, Deborah. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.